Damn mouse isn't working. There's a little freebie there that's not going to be on the podcast. Now that my mouse is working, I will click record. What's up? How's it going? I'm back for another podcast episode / filming myself in a room by myself for YouTube's enjoyment. Before I get started, I'm going to go ahead and it's too long to wait for me to reopen, so I'm going to go ahead and support old Live Oak Brewing Company here and pour me up a little Czech pills. Ooh, podcast can hear it and the YouTubes can see it. There you go, and the nice Tanglefoot glass. Na zdraví. Well, what's up, y'all? I was contemplating not making a video or podcast about this, but figured I'd go ahead and discuss it because that's what this whole podcast has been about, documenting the journey of a tiny little Czech lager brewery. So yeah, I feel like I have been a little bit maybe pessimistic or not even pessimistic, just bitching and feeling sorry for myself in the last few episodes. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to be positive because I understand how fortunate I am to be able to do all this stuff. And I feel pretty stoked about everything long term. And so I'm just going to be in a good mood. And although the content may be a little bit less than ideal situations, but I'm going to go ahead and try to present that the best way that I can. So cheers. Let's talk about my last brew day and kind of talk about the upcoming weeks at Tanglefoot. So for those that are just tuning in maybe on the YouTubes, or if you just started listening to the podcast, I am currently closed. I've been closed for a couple of weeks now. I ran out of beer. I was transitioning from brewing on a 1-barrel system to my new 3.5, 4-barrel-ish system. And the process of getting that online has taken much, much longer than I anticipated. But then finally kind of like got brews under my belt, filled up all the tanks, and got beer fermenting, was looking pretty good. And then about 40 days into the first beer's fermentation / lagering, I took a sample and tasted it and was picking up some off flavor, DMS, and ultimately ended up dumping that batch and was super upset. And so just kind of really trying to nail down what needed to change in order for that not to be the case again. So that's kind of where we're at now. I ran out of beer, I had to dump my first batch, and now I'm just waiting on the new batches to get ready so that I can open up again. And so what happened last week, I believe last Sunday, today is the 25th of July, and I brewed on the previous Sunday. I needed to brew a batch of 12-degree pale lager, so I was going into that brew day feeling very, at least optimistic about getting this batch of beer made correctly. So the 12 degree is my personal favorite, and it's kind of like what I would consider my flagship Pilsner. So I went in with a pretty optimistic mindset, and I started the process of getting all the equipment moved out of the way. If you haven't seen that, there's some TikTok videos of me moving all the shit. But put all the equipment together and then hooked up my new burner. That was the big thing. So with the DMS in the first batch, I wasn't able to boil it adequately, and so that just left that DMS cooked corn flavor in the beer, and ultimately I had to dump it. So I wanted to make sure that wasn't an issue this time. So I got a new, like, really heavy duty big burner. So I went ahead and hooked that up, got all the tanks filled with water, started the brew day, and turned on the burner, and it was looking promising. I had plenty of propane. The burner was burning pretty hot, so I was like, oh, this is going to work. And then slowly it seemed like it was not working as efficiently as I had hoped, which is a bummer. But I was kind of like, whatever, I'm already here brewing with this new burner, so just let it go. So I was heating up the strike water, and it was taking about as long as it was taking with my old burner. So I was like, starting to get pretty frustrated, and it was really burning through a lot of gas. So I have these small propane tanks, so when I run out of one, I have to change it over. So this burner was not staying lit. I think the regulator just didn't have enough throughput, and it was freezing up, and so the burner wasn't staying lit. That was pretty annoying, and it also wasn't heating up at a quick enough pace to really make a difference from the old burner. So frustratingly, I was just lighting it every like 5 or 10 minutes. Finally, it was getting close to strike temperature, so I was like, all right, whatever, at least it's here. Like, we'll just, we'll continue with the brew day. And I'm sweating. It's very, very hot back there, and I hear it sounded like a gunshot, a huge pop. And what happened was, I'm an idiot, and I had this cast iron burner, this large burner, sitting on the ground, concrete floor, and it heated the concrete, and specifically the rocks underneath the concrete, the medium that fills like the concrete. It heated it up so much that it basically exploded a rock inside of the concrete, and it created this shallow little divot. But it was, honestly, it was very disheartening, and I was super upset. I just kind of like put my hands on my head and walked around for 10 minutes, just like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have this whole thing full of 160-degree water. This burner is not going to work. I've got a hole in the floor. This is just turning into an awful, awful day. I was just like, I was about to leave. I was just about to peace. But then I kind of calmed down for a second. I was like, well, you can't really leave. This is kind of one of the perks of owning your own business and operating a business is there's no one to like hand this off to. You got to deal with it. So I settled down, and I was like, cool, this burner's just not working. I can figure it out later. Let's get back to basics and just heat this up enough, 10 more degrees, so I can mash in. So brought out the old burners, had to basically unscrew the legs so that I could fit it underneath, because the kettles, the tanks that I use to brew. So I have a hot liquor tank, I have a mash tun, and I have a boil kettle. They're all like, 5 barrels in volume, and the one in the middle that had the burner underneath is filled with, hundreds of pounds of water. So I had to put the old burner underneath it, but I can't move the hundreds of pounds of water. So I had to basically unscrew the legs and kind of like shove it underneath. It was very weird, but it ended up getting it underneath there and turning it on and heating it up the last few degrees. And then I mashed in and was just, it was a lot of emotions, and I was very frustrated, but I was like, all right, let's get this mashed in. So I got it mashed in, and I was like, you know what? These burners that I was now using, because the other burner blew a hole in the concrete, I was like, well, this is the problem with the other brew days, is that this burner is not enough heat. So I shoved 2 of the burners together underneath the boil kettle so that I would have enough BTUs to have a good rolling boil. So got that set up. After the mash was done, started running off, and started running off nicely, and then ended up turning on both burners, and boom, it was heating up like a champ. I was super happy with it, and the boil started, and it was rolling. It was good. It was exactly what I needed to alleviate that DMS issue. So I get my hop additions in there and stuff. And this whole time, so I guess I should have mentioned at the beginning, I was also needing to rack or transfer a beer from a fermentation vessel, which is where fermentation happens, to the bright tank, which is a place where the beer lagers and you carbonate it and all that stuff. And so had to move the beer from here over here via like sanitized hoses, and then empty the vessel, clean it, and get it completely rinsed and then sanitized again for the next batch to go in. So as I'm doing that, I get the beer transferred. It went pretty smoothly. I start purging, or just basically emptying the bottom of the tank. During this time of me like kind of getting the transfer going on and whatever, at the beginning of the brew day, I also forgot to mention, this is what happens when you're just going off the cuff, but the floor drain was not draining, which is another giant stressor on this brew day. So floor drain's not draining. I try to kind of snake it out or do whatever, anyways, my dad ended up coming in halfway through the brew day and really like just having a different perspective on it, and just being like, hey, we'll put this thing down there and we'll just like, we'll spray it out with this hose that goes into the drain and knocks stuff loose. Well, that worked and it was awesome, and I'm super thankful that he showed up. But so that's another thing that was kind of happening in the back of my head. So I cleaned the tank, or I'm starting to clean the tank. So the first thing you do is you kind of purge out or empty the bottom of the fermentation vessel. At the bottom of the fermentation vessel is obviously some beer left over, but a bunch of yeast too. So, you have to dump all that yeast out. So I'm just like filling up a bucket of, a lot of, several tens of pounds of yeast out of this fermentation vessel. And it's like good, clean yeast, and it smells great. And anybody that has brewed, there's something about like handling yeast that's really kind of visceral and is nice. It's one of the nicer parts of brewing. Is like you're taking these organisms and you're putting it into sugar water, and then they start fermenting it. It's kind of cool. So anyways, dump all that, start rinsing, start cleaning the tank, and then finally rinse it again. And then I get the sanitization loop going, and like, okay, now after all this is done, my boil's going. So I've got 90 minutes in the boil. It's pretty much downtime. So I start obviously setting up my heat exchanger to sanitize, and then I go to harvest yeast from another fermentation vessel. So I have my sanitized container, and I go to open the bottom of the valve to get all the yeast out of there, and I get like a half pound or a pound of like good thick yeast slurry, and then it just thins out into beer, which is like, my heart just sank. So basically, I'm needing to harvest all that stuff that I just took out of that tank in the other fermentation vessel that was good, healthy, awesome yeast, and I just dumped it down the drain. I needed that to be in the other vessel, and when I went to harvest it, it was just not there. And I had harvested a very small amount out of it for the previous fermentation, but not nearly enough to like empty the whole tank. So I'm basically like pulling this like really, it's just beer with some yeast in it. I'm just pulling as much as I can to try to get into this fermentation. So I'm like, well, now I go through this horrible brew day and have this like, the floor explodes, the drain's not draining. I rush to like rack this beer. It's turning into another 12-hour brew day, and then at the end of it, I don't even have enough yeast to pitch into this beer, which is like the worst case scenario for brewing. So I was beat physically and mentally, and so I ended up pitching everything that I had, and so wrapped up the brew day. The knockout was still wonky. I still can't knock out an adequate amount of beer for the system. I just don't have enough cold liquor, and it is so hot back there. I took a temperature reading of the back of that, like the kitchen area that I brewed in, and it was like at 115 degrees and humid because I'm boiling. So yeah, it was pretty rough. Ended up, getting out of there at like a 12-hour brew day, and just was completely drained, went home and just like vegged out. But so then I was super concerned about that beer not taking off or not having enough yeast to ferment the beer. So I called my dad a couple of days later and asked him to check on the beer. Said, hey, is it bubbling? That's kind of like signs of active fermentation. He said, no bubbles are coming out. It's not fermenting. And I was like, great. And I'm just like livid. So I just drive up to Temple to check on it, took a reading, and it had dropped in gravity. And so I was like, okay, maybe it, like the blow off tube that the CO2 would come out of and bubble. It was kind of like just resting on top of the water. So I was like, oh, maybe it was too high. Came back the next 2 days later or something, and it still wasn't bubbling, but the gravity was continuing to drop. So fermentation's happening. It's moving at a rate that is similar to previous fermentation. So I'm, obviously it was underpitched. Hopefully there are no other off flavors coming out of this, but just full transparency. This is everything that happens when you're trying to run a brewery 2 days out of the week. So, but outside of that, I was tasting DMS, the off flavor that I dumped my first batch for, the first batch had that I ended up dumping because of it. tasted that in my dark lager, which is like, oh great, now I'm gonna have to dump this batch. And then didn't really taste it in my third beer, which was the 10 degree pale lager, which was surprising because it is like the lightest beer of the three. And so I'm like, okay, well, we'll just see. And then this weekend went back up, checked on the beers, and did not really pick up much of that DMS character in the dark lager. So maybe I don't know, maybe in my head, maybe it's still there, but it's not noticeable to a degree that I would want to dump the beer. It's tasting really good, actually. It's like real chocolatey. So I think we'll probably see some slight, maybe more ester production in these tanks. I'm not sure, but it's tasting pretty chocolatey and smooth. So I think I'll end up keeping that batch. And then the 10 degree pale lager, I do pick up a little bit of it, but it's almost, I don't know. We'll see. I'm not going to serve a beer that has that off flavor in it, but if it's appropriate and not like, if it's not, super in your face and assertive, then I'll just have to make a judgment call. If not, then I'll dump that batch and I'll just, 2 more months until I get another batch of the 10 degree pale lager. So that's kind of the overview of all the weird stuff that's been going on. And I'm going to take a sip of lager now to cleanse my throat from talking the whole time. So that's all the stuff that's happening beer production wise. But now let's get into the kind of more hopefully fun stuff. In these weeks that I'm off, I've been like really, because all the money coming into Tanglefoot has like stopped. And so I just renewed my license, a TABC license, $3,000 for 2 years, the City of Temple license, $500. And I still have to buy ingredients to brew these new batches. So like, that's just been kind of like weighing on me. And I'm just like, well, what can I do? I want to do something. I need to keep some income coming in. So I'm toying around with a couple of ideas, but ultimately I'm not going to do things that I thought I might do just to try to keep money coming in, something hokey. Like I don't want to release like a stupid piece of swag or anything like that. I want to keep everything pretty consistent and quality on my end, so that this brand is all built on serving the best beer I can possibly make and hopefully the best merch or the best service and the best experience. So I just want to make sure that everything I do is quality first, and then if money comes out of it, that's good. But so I'm thinking about some things in the future, but I'll talk more about that if any of that comes to fruition. But so now I'm kind of in this phase where I'm waiting on beers again. I will be brewing again next week, but I'll be in this waiting phase for the next few weeks that I'm still closed. And so I'm going to start working on making the restaurant portion of Al's feel more like a pub environment. So most likely gonna try to add some games, maybe, just see if I can find some things here and there that will zhuzh the place up, like some old-timey beer focused posters, or just get some decor that makes it feel more beer-like. And then ultimately I'd like to get a sign out front that is more large and in your face, like, hey, this is Tanglefoot Brewing. And then I'll update, kind of maybe put dominoes on the table and get I'm contemplating getting like couches or some like softer furniture in there just to chill while people are drinking, and then ultimately down the road get some patio and stuff, patio furniture and build out that area. But it's all all that's kind of baby stepping it. So I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I'm not trying to overextend myself and just like continue to like take on projects that I can't complete. But I will be leaving my job at Black Star in mid-August, probably like around the 20th. So I will then have plenty of time, obviously full-time, to go and open Tanglefoot, and hopefully I'll have beer available so that I can sell it, so that I can make a living, which is, that's ideal, right? When you're running a business, is you can actually pay yourself. So it's a lot of stuff going on. Look forward to any announcements about this or like a grand opening party. I'm probably going to do a grand opening, ribbon cutting, some sort of like event whenever I do have enough beers, and canning is always on the table. But there's some logistics with that need to be figured out first. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of stuff, but I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty positive. A lot of positive things happening in my life, so can't complain too much. I'm just super appreciative of everybody that like supports me and follows me and has either been in to drink beers or just kind of like engage with me online, because it does mean a lot. And I'm really trying to build this brand to be something special and accessible. So I hope that everybody will continue to bear with me while I get all these problems sussed out, and hopefully only good beer on the other end of this. So that's all I got for this one. I'll try to keep more posts coming. It's just difficult because I'm not like up there doing anything beer related. If I'm just like sitting there, it's hard to be creative and try to do fun stuff. But I will do my best. So thank you for listening to me talk about all of the issues, and I hope this gives you some insight into what it takes to run a brewery. And if you're thinking about doing it, fuck it, do it. Who knows? I don't know. Do whatever you want. Thanks for listening on the podcast and also YouTube. Cool. I see you. What's up? Comment or whatever. Engage and blow this channel up, and we'll be rolling in the dough, I'm sure, once I get 30 subscribers. So later, y'all. Bye-bye.